The time is at hand.
From Williamson, West Virginia, the gateway to the crackheads, this is In Dark Places. My name is Junebug Fugit. I don't go with the narrative. I don't trust the government. I don't make every little conversation a political argument. I believe spiritual warfare is a very real thing, and many of the things that we talk about on this show are demonic in nature. This week on the show, we have glitches in the Matrix. What do you make of those? I don't really know what to think about them. They sure are fun to read. I have a story that is pretty creepy, at least for me. Back when I was in high school, me and a couple friends had just gotten back to my house from a party, and it was very late, around 2 a.m. As we were about to all go to sleep, I decided to take a quick shower because I had had a lot of beer spilled all over my shirt by a drunk girl, and it also smelled like a pile of cigarette butts. I'm not the kind of guy to just hop in bed after a night of filthy debauchery, even if I'm super drunk. So as my buddies turned on Family Guy to watch as they fell asleep, I hopped into the shower. Normal shower cleaning commenced as planned, and because my friends are the kind of people that watch television obnoxiously loud, and the bathroom shower being very close to the television, I could kind of hear the episode of Family Guy from inside the shower. After taking what seemed like a 15-minute shower with what sounded like the same episode of Family Guy slightly playing in the background, I hopped out and dried off. Upon exiting the windowless bathroom, I looked out into the room and realized that it was now daytime. The clock read 10 a.m. Somehow I had just gone 8 hours in the shower. What doesn't add up is that the water never got cold, and I never heard the Family Guy episode end. And most importantly, that I was only in the shower for 10-15 minutes. To this day, no one believes me, and we affectionately refer to the event as Shower Time Machine. When I was in the Air Force, I was at Area 51. Don't ask why I was there, and don't ask what I was doing. I won't tell you. But after I was done doing what I needed to do, I asked one of the guards what the weirdest thing he has experienced there was. He said, Bald Mountain. I asked him to elaborate. He said to take a particular road and see for yourself. So some fellow airmen and I take the challenge. We go up to this road, go up a hill. We stopped at this overlook and didn't see anything unusual or unordinary. It was getting dark, so we turned around disappointed. We go on the same road that we came in. We were still going uphill. It made no sense, but we shrugged it off. After traveling on this road for 5 minutes, it brings us to the same overlook. We tried getting down again, only with the same results. We take the other road, still went uphill, and it brought us back to the same overlook. At this point, we were all questioning our sanity. We got out of the black SUV. We break out 2 different color trail markers, one neon pink and the other one neon orange. We split into 2 teams of 2, and we hiked these 2 roads, marking the trail with our trail markers. We laid down the orange markers while they were placing the pink markers. As we walked, we were going uphill. If you turned around, you went uphill. The land made no sense. It defied all logic. After about 20 minutes on this hike, we started to see their pink markers. This also just brought on further confusion. After about 10 more minutes, we arrived at the same overlook. The other group arrived 10 minutes later. They saw our orange markers. We never saw each other cross paths. We started to panic and wonder if we were to ever get off this mountain. After we were trying to figure out what was going on, we decided to try and call someone. None of our flip phones worked. No cell service. Compasses didn't help either. They would just spin. I thought we were in some episode of The Twilight Zone. We slept in the SUV, and when morning came, we tried going down the hill that we came in on. And to our surprise, we were going downhill. We get off the mountain, go back to the base. I find the guard, and I just looked at him with this expression on my face, as if he could answer the 1,000 questions that I had. He just said, I know, and left. To this day, I have no idea what happened. Once while my friend was talking to me while walking home from tuition on a roadside pavement, I zoned out, imagining what would happen if I saw a red Jaguar crash into us from behind. I looked back as if an instinct, but saw no cars in sight. We reached home safely, and the next day, apparently, a red Jaguar crashed into roughly the same area that I zoned out in last night. No one was hurt bad, though. I was in a meeting with a coworker last year when his cell phone went off, which had been on silent. It started ringing full volume. He fumbled it out of his pocket, laid it on the table, and all three of us in the room looked down at it. The number it showed was calling was his own. Weird. We all stared at it until it stopped ringing. We started discussing how bizarre it was, until the voicemail pops up on the screen. Now we're all super curious, so when he opens his voicemail folder, he has a message on his own phone, and the best part is it's January 1st, 2044. Now we're all scared to death as he hits play and puts it on speaker. The most crazy, glitchy sounding white noise I've ever heard, with what sounded like heavy breathing and a very faint voice talking through it. I called a couple of coworkers to listen to it. Everybody freaked out. We went on with our day. He went to show another coworker a couple hours later, and it had suddenly vanished. The coworker is still convinced to this day that he knows the day he's going to die. It was late one night, and my older brother was out at his best friend's house for a party. Weirdly enough, I decided to watch TV in his room, which I never do, and he usually locks his door. While watching TV, it gets late, and I soon start to doze off. Suddenly I get this rush of anxiety, and an image of a blurred face pops into my head. What made things worse was that the face was not only blurred, but it had a bullet wound on the side of his head. I got really paranoid and couldn't sleep, and didn't know why this popped into my head. I was scared and couldn't get rid of the sick feeling that had overcame me. I grabbed my rosary, and since I was doing my first communion at the time, I had a booklet about praying the rosary. Got the booklet and started praying until I felt better. I've never been religious and was only doing my first communion to make my mom happy. Anyway, come morning there's a story in the news that there was a shooting at a house party. The party where my brother was at. His best friend's party. My brother wasn't shot, but his best friend was, on the side of the head. The weird part, it was a stray bullet. He was in the backyard when the shooting occurred in the front. The bullet literally entered the skin by his temple and exited on the other side. It only grazed him. He said that seconds before it hit, he moved for some weird reason, and that's what saved him. It freaked me out when they told me. I've never said anything to either of them. I was at my brother's house. He lived in our temple in Sydney, and at 12 a.m. I decided to go for a walk since our temple is in the middle of the jungle, and you can see so much of the wildlife at night, as well as potential attempt to ghost hunt. It was just behind the temple, and I thought I saw my brother digging a hole behind the temple, where usually is covered with gravel. I called out his name and approached him and asked him what he was doing, and as I take 2 steps forward, he disappeared. I walked up to the spot, and it was a pile of gravel and a shovel beside of it. At the time, I thought it was nothing, and I was kind of sleepy too, so I let it slide. Note, I could hear him dig. I went back home and went straight to bed. Next morning, he gets up and tells me that he had a dream that he was digging my grave behind the temple. I told him that I did see him digging, so we both ran to the cameras and checked the footage. Right around 12:15, the camera gets fuzzy, right as I walked up to the pile. We never talked about it to anyone since we always had abnormalities between each other and our dreams. Usually we have the same dream, but in 2 different perspectives. When I was in 5th grade, we were playing Smear the Queer. Kids are awesome, right? And I got the ball thrown to me, and I just started running, and then I turned around and saw my friend right there about to tackle me. I immediately remembered what was about to happen. In quotes, remembered. And I swear that it felt like it was the 3rd or 4th time that I had been through this scenario. I knew I was going to get tackled and knocked out. I tossed the ball toward him and he said something like, "No, no, no, stop it. I'm going to get knocked out." Picture this in slow motion as he's diving to smear me. And sure enough, I woke up a few minutes later. I got knocked out. The strangest thing about this was feeling of multiple times being there at that moment. Maybe it was my spirit, having already lived throughout all the times, trying to stop this moment from going wrong. Maybe I would have been killed by accident or something, if my deja vu didn't prepare me. I don't know. It's crazy to think about stuff like this. And I remember nothing specific having this happen over times too, where it will feel like it's happened only once before, but multiple times. I was working with a group of guys and we were all lined up along this drape, which was slowly descending from the roof, and we were rolling it up. Everyone was lined up evenly apart from me, who was about a foot closer to the person on my left than to my right. Someone shouted that I should move along, and totally out of character, I yelled back, "Sorry then, it'd be perfect, and I can't do that because it would be an affront to Allah. I'm not Muslim. I'm not the sort of person to argue over pointless things." Generally, in situations like that, I'd have been central anyway. A couple people laughed. Someone calls me an idiot and tells me to move along, but I ignored them and continued to kneel off-center. We roll up a bit of carpet, and then there is a sharp thud and a weird vibrating hum. I look to my right, and directly where I should have been, a large lump of metal is sitting, vibrating on the floor. Everyone near me is white as a sheet, and I just stood up and walked outside for a cigarette. Without a doubt, if I hadn't been pointlessly obstinate and had moved along, that would have smashed my skull. When I think about it, I can still see the metal shimmer as it hummed and vibrated in the little dent that it had made on the wooden floor. There's something about the moments that kind of sticks with you. I stepped backward into an alcove once as a stack of boards fell from a forklift onto a space where I'd been working. I can still feel the panic as I leapt backward, and the joy. I was enveloped in the niche, and the boards crashed against the wall. Everyone came running and screaming my name, and then I stepped out of the gap onto the boards, and everyone kind of melted with relief. Our friend and I were training our lucid dream skills. We both put a background image on our phones that had the question, "Are you dreaming?" The idea was to link your phone to this question so that in the event that you pick up your phone in your dream, you will be primed to ask yourself that exact question. One night we both stayed up extremely late and went to sleep. Nearly an hour or so into falling asleep, my dad walked in and kept asking me all these bizarre questions. Because I was so extremely tired, I didn't have the clarity of mind to get a bearing on reality. I assumed that I was in a dream. I looked at my phone to confirm. I didn't see the background image, "Are you dreaming?" So I knew I was in a dream. The issue is that everything felt so real. I went past my dad to the pantry, where I made myself a bowl of cereal, and sort of walked around my dad as if he was a ghost. I wanted to test my newfound dream powers. I clearly saw myself as a machine, acting automatically, pursuing these desires that just popped into my head randomly. It was very clear that I had no control of my body. It was just reacting to various inputs. However, shortly after going back into my room to eat breakfast, I woke up and was actually eating cereal. My agency goes back into my body, and I feel normal again. Basically, I have no idea what happened, but I was in this bizarre waking dream world where I was able to obliterate my first person's perspective and see my mind for how it actually is, rather than how it is relayed to me. My grandmother was seriously ill, and the hospital sent her home and made her comfortable. We knew that she would die at any time. We took turns staying in the house with her, usually 2 at a time. One evening, my folks were staying over with her at around 3:30 a.m., witching hour. Our home phone rang. My sister was up before me, but it stopped ringing before she got to it. She dialed 1471, the UK equivalent of star 69, and it was my grandmother's number. She called back, and my mum answered. "How did you know to call?" asked my mum. My grandmother had just died at that very moment. My sister told her that we had just had a call from the house, apart from my folks and the nurse, no one else was in my grandmother's house with them. My mom said that no one had left the room, and certainly no one had used the phone. It's about midnight, and we've run out of milk, so I popped in my earbuds, take a walk into the garage. The sound starts crackling and popping, and I realize I've killed another set of earbuds, and I've got no money to replace them. As I'm thinking this, I'm suddenly aware that there's something literally at my feet on the pavement. Why, it's a new set of earbuds, exactly the same as the ones plugged into my phone. I don't really know if this counts as a glitch exactly, but I'm so attuned to feeling, quote, where police are located on roads. Like, I'll be driving along going a little bit too fast. Nothing immense, but enough to probably get a ticket. Or fiddling with my current drink or food, and then I'll just stop. It's almost as if the world slows down for a moment, and I get this awful shuddering feeling pass over me that just begs, I guess, for me to stop fiddling or slow down. And I do it, and all of a minute or so later, we're just around a blind bend. There's a police officer. This happens on both well-known roads and completely unknown ones. I've freaked friends out with it before. And also, quote, feel accidents way before I see them on the road. The other day, as an example, I was driving back from the doctor's. A friend on hands-free phone call. I interrupt them mid-sentence and say, pretty sure I'm about to hit a ton of traffic accident or something. And sure enough, a couple minutes down the road, and one blaring siren later, big accident, police surrounding the scene. This is a comment on that last one. Someone said, I had a similar experience in May of 2005. I was in my apartment with my then girlfriend when I stopped in my tracks and said to her, I need to go to Brad's and call home. I just feel like I have to go. I remember that neither of us had a cell phone at the time, and I would drive to Brad's to use his. So I jumped in my car to leave the apartment complex, and as soon as I got to the gate to exit, Brad was coming into my apartment complex with his arm out of the window, with the phone in his hand. Yo, your brother's on the phone. He needs to talk to you. I responded with, I know, I was on my way to your house to go call home. So I'm now a little freaked out because my gut tells me that this cannot be good. My gut was correct. My best friend from the womb, literally, we were born on the same day at the same hospital, and our parents were friends, had taken his own life. He was battling a heroin addiction and was actually doing well until he missed a Thursday dose of methadone, and the clinic was closed on Friday for holiday. So he was supposed to get a weekend dose to get him to Monday. Well, by Sunday he was in full-blown withdrawal and decided that his pain was greater than his coping skills. At 3 a.m., the witching hour, I was chatting away with my husband while he was deployed. When he had to abruptly leave, I thought nothing of it. Someone was demanding the computer, or he was being called away for something or another. I went back to sleep and proceeded to dream about him being hit by an IED. I woke up an hour or so later. I don't know what that means. Shout out Tony. Help me with that one. I wake up an hour later as he is being put onto the helicopter thing in my dream, and spent the rest of the day uneasy, but tried to shake it off. That evening I missed a call from a military hospital. I called back fearing the worst, and the guys on the other line did their best to convince me that nothing was wrong, and it was a glitch call. A couple hours later, my husband calls me himself. Yep, he'd been hurt by an IED, but what's weird is that once he was home, I was telling him the story of my dream, and he just kind of looked at me. Apparently, the reality synced up with my dream, and then the how, the when, the who, the what, the little details all matched up. It turns out when I was dreaming about him being hurt, lines up with my husband's actual time of injuries, and the moments immediately after. I had a dream that someone was standing over me at the edge of my bed, and then there was a bright flash and a bang that woke me up. I apparently yelled out, "No!" and sat up in my bed, according to my ex. I remember sitting there dazed and shaken, and it took me about an hour to go back to sleep. The next morning my mother called me and told me that my stepdad had been assassinated in Rio. I asked if he had been shot, and she said yes. I asked if he was laying down, and she paused and said yes. Then I asked if he was in bed, and she got kind of hysterical and asked me how I knew that. I was so freaked out. I really don't believe in the supernatural, but it was really eerie. It kind of made me rethink my beliefs about the world and how we are connected. In elementary school, I had a vivid dream about being in an airport. I was sitting and watching people go by. One person in particular struck me as abnormally realistic and memorable. An Italian-looking guy, olive skin, darkish hair, but not Arabic/African/Asian, with those weird 3-inch dreads, wearing that kind of hat that looks vaguely like a fedora, but has a flatter top and is rounder. It had a piece of fabric along the side of the hat, the colors of the Russian flag, with a small pin attached to it, attaching it to the hat. The next day in music class, that guy walks in and shows us how to play bongos. He was the substitute teacher. Every detail of him was identical to my dream. One time I was in my room on my computer when my mom came in the door and told me that dinner's ready. And then she left, but her shadow didn't. 22 years ago, I used to go to church once a week with my parents and my grandparents. We were familiar with many of the other regulars, and my grandfather was a minister and personally knew the priest. One day after Mass, we're all standing near the entrance chatting. Some woman goes up to my grandpa and puts her hand on his cheek and said, "Everything's going to be fine." She walked away, and everyone is really confused. So my grandpa asks around about the lady, and no one knows who he's talking about. The priest has no idea either. When we each tried to describe her, we all said she had different colored hair and was a different age. We were thoroughly confused, but nothing seemed to come of it. 2 weeks later, on Easter Sunday, my grandparents are in an accident on the way home from a family picnic. My grandma is just bruised, but my grandpa was hospitalized with a concussion and some broken bones. I think he was out of it completely for a few hours. He's completely healthy now, but that incident made him become more involved with church and volunteering. Ever since I was in my early 20s, I've followed, quote, so to speak, noises, premonitions, oddities. After a while, I got used to it and generally annoyed by it. Back in 2005, I moved to Ontario into a house with my landlord and his girlfriend. It was a shared residence, and my room was in the basement. I was awake very early daily as my work shift started at 5:30. I remember being in the bathroom just after 4 a.m. when I heard footsteps coming down the stairs to the basement. I thought it was a little unusual. The hall light came on, as seen from underneath the bathroom door. Those steps continued on down the hall into the laundry room. I heard the clothes being loaded into the dryer, and then the dryer turning on. I wondered who was doing laundry so early in the morning. Maybe my landlord forgot his work clothes in the washing machine. Bathroom done, I opened up the bathroom door. The second the door was opened, the tiniest amount. Silence. There was no hallway light on. The dryer was not running. I then realized that the footsteps never came back from the laundry room. When I went to the laundry room to investigate, the dryer was empty. The dryer was hot inside, like it had just been running. First thing across my mind was, it followed me all the way from Manitoba. When I was about 8 or 9 years old, I was at day camp by the pool. We were doing lifeguard training, and one of the exercises was to retrieve a 10-pound brick from the bottom of the 8-foot-deep end. When it was my turn, eager to prove my strength, I swam to the bottom of the pool and began ascending with the brick. It quickly became clear that I was running out of air and would not make it to the surface, but I still didn't want to give up. Suddenly my vision clouded over with blue and a lot of pain went away. It was sunny and I opened my eyes. I was underwater in a shallow section of the pool, looking across to the deep end. I saw a little girl struggling with a brick. I remember thinking, hey, that's me. Before everything went blue again, I was back in my own body, running out of air, holding the brick. I was working for a week in Townsville, Australia, and had a free weekend before I flew home, so I hired a car and drove up to Cairns to have a look around. I didn't make a motel booking, as I thought I'd play it by ear. Turns out that every hotel and motel in Cairns was booked out, though they still had the vacancy signs off. After about 8 attempts, I pulled into this funny little place and asked if they had a room. The woman said no, but there's a possibility. There's one room that is booked, but the people haven't turned up yet. She'll make one last attempt to contact them to see if they still want the room. I offered to take the room, but vacate it if they turned up. So she tries all the contact numbers and there's no response. She offers the room to me. She passed over the booking form and I filled it out and passed it back. As she reads all the details, she gives me a weird look and asks if I'd already booked the room. I repeat my story about driving up impulsively after work, and she asks if I made any booking. I started to think that the people up in Cairns might be a little slow, so I gave her my story again. She passes over the form with my details and another form with the details of the family that never showed up and whose room I was taking. The surname on both is the same. Weird. It's not a particularly common name either. Not sure she actually believed it wasn't me. And that, kids, is why I changed my name to Gruntanus. I was about 10 years old and it was before the movie The Matrix. I fell asleep at my grandma's house and had a very vivid dream. In the dream, I dreamt of a large figure who was named Morpheus. When I woke up, I was curious about the name Morpheus, as I had not heard it before. I asked my parents about it. They looked it up and found him a mythological god of sleep that appears to people in dreams. Okay, I got one more. I was like maybe 5 or 6 years old, living in some sort of compound apartments where all the other relatives resided. And there's this one time that my aunt and uncle were going to the mall along with my mother. So all went normal. I was left with the house help / maid, and she fed me lunch. Then afterward, she took a nap on the sofa and was sitting on the floor playing with stuff. Then the weirdest thing happened. I glanced at the maid and she was lying on her side on the sofa with her hands like a praying position on one side of her cheek. You know, that kind of sleep position. And all of a sudden, her face started changing. I kid you not. It was like in the movies where there's a slow transition of something changing into another, like soft blurring or overlapping the faces, but I can clearly see it. As the transition completes, she changed into my mother. I remember that my mom went with my aunt and my uncle to the mall, and now I'm in the living room floor looking at my mother sleeping. I don't know what just happened. Then when the time she woke up, it was like nothing, as if everything was normal. When my aunt and uncle came back, they were with the maid. I was dumbfounded. There were moments in my life that I still tell her about what happened, and she won't believe me. Maybe in my whole existence, I'm 30 years old now, I told her about the transition of her. I witnessed multiple times, mostly when the incident was still fresh and up until my high school days. And all she responded to me was in a tone like I was only talking nonsense, but in a joking manner, not angry at me or whatever. Even now, when I try to tell her about that experience, she still remembers how I rambled about it ever since. So I'm sure she still knows I'm very consistent of what I saw. Well, there you go. That's all the Glitch in the Matrix stories for right now. I'll be back with more probably in about a month. These tend to kind of rotate once a month, if you haven't noticed. I'm not a time traveler or anything, but I think next week's show is going to be about hauntings. It's pretty safe to say. Anyway, thanks for listening. I really appreciate you. Take care of your crazy selves out there. I'll see you next time. God bless.